Thank you for coming, I really appreciate it. So yeah, we're here to talk about African fashion. There's been a real rise of interest in the subject in the last 5 years, and definitely it's crescendoing in the last 2 years. So we're here to talk about why there's a buzz and how you turn that into something real in terms of an industry that makes money for people. So I'm Helen Jennings, I'm a journalist and author. Let me introduce the panel. So here we have Anna McCreath, a Kenya-based label of Kenya. We have Erzumah Ackerson of Bestow, Elan, who's part of the show after this, and wearing beautiful trousers like that. We have Samson Soboye, also menswear designer, store owner, part of the show, and Arieta Mujay at the end, who's an all-round fashion powerhouse. So to begin with, Anne is actually the only one based in Africa and East Africa, so we thought it would be great if she could give her insights from being based in the continent, and also tell us more about, she's got a lot of current projects on the go, bringing East African fashion to London, so I want her to tell you more about it.
Thank you. So thanks very much for coming. It's lovely to be here, and I feel very honoured to be able to explain a little bit about what's going on in Kenya right now, because when I come to London I get the feeling that there's a lot of knowledge on West African fashion, but not so much about what's happening in East Africa. So I have been in the industry for 18 years, set up a brand, Kiko, and in 2008 I founded with some other friends and FAFA, Festival of African Fashion and Arts, which has grown into a prime platform for designers. And Helen has been with us a couple of times there. And the whole aim is to have a professional platform that can get our designs out to the world. And what has often happened with fashion shows has been a bit of a shambles. So we're trying to make sure that our show production is fantastic, so that we get great photographs. And what I'm noticing as I'm in this market is there's really very big difference between what's happening in East Africa and West Africa. East Africa is quite influenced by India and the East in general. And the designers are working a lot with plain colour fabrics. I don't know if, I think this is about to come up and you'll see some of them up there. And I'm also noticing a very strong, lots of strong accessory collections. We have a tradition in jewellery, in beadwork, but a lot of designers are taking that to another level and doing very outstanding contemporary pieces. So why I put together the presentation was just to give you a feel of the different brands that are out there. We have FAFA Insight, which is a young designer competition. We have young designers, and we have established brands like my own one. And we're all looking to take our products into different markets, because Kenya's become known as a production house for people like Vivienne Westwood, Karen Millen, and so on. And we sometimes find that a little bit frustrating, because we know that there's actually a lot of design talent as well. And we don't really want to just be producing for big international brands. We want our brands to get out there, get known, and sell in the world market. So London becomes particularly attractive in that venture. Also because we have lots of shopping malls, and fast fashion brands are busy eyeing how to get into the Kenyan market. And so to stay relevant and to stay out there, even for the locals who are aspiring to wear international brands, it becomes quite critical for our brands to have a presence globally, not just locally. So that's the mission we're on right now. I think that's all I really need to say about it. You'll see there's quite a big variety in looks. And I don't know if you would agree with me or not that it is a different feel from West Africa. The only brands that used print, we had 18 designers. I think there was a South Sudanese brand, my own brand, my daughter's brand, and one other, and that was it. Everyone else had gone away from print. Some had used the Maasai checks, and others just plain fabric with lots of embellishment. So thank you for the opportunity of introducing them.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your current projects? I know you're starting a menswear line and you're bringing some things into some... How are you going to bring the brands over here? How's it going to work?
What we realised when we did a pop-up shop in November last year was that Kiko Romeo, which is my brand, is a brand that already people do know about it. And so it's important that as part of FAFA, Kiko Romeo is a very strong presence, and that can help other brands get into the market. So we plan to carry on doing pop-up shops over here. I'm actually setting up a company here to be able to import, because I've found a lot of retailers don't want to go through the trouble of actually importing. So I want to set that up, bring the brands here, and then distribute from there, whether through pop-up or through bricks and mortar. Yeah.
Great. So Erzumah here, I'll tell you a little bit about her. She studied at the London College of Fashion. She worked with designers such as Jonathan Saunders and Kisa. She established Bestow Elan in 2007, shown in London, in Lagos, in Ghana, doing great things with that. It's worn by celebrities like Shinge from Noisettes, in all the major UK press, and my perspective on the brand is really beautiful angular draping, lovely fabrics and embroideries, and she does a mean bustle. Get one. Can you tell me a little about your journey in fashion? I mean, why did you want to be a designer?
I don't think it was really a choice. I think from childhood I used to watch my mum constructing and making clothes for us, so I think it was like a generation thing. When she wasn't using the machine, I would try and design clothes for myself, my dollies, etc., etc. And then I wanted to go straight into fashion from leaving school, but from an African family's perspective, fashion isn't the way forward. So I went into business. I did business for a while. But if your heart's not in something, you're always going to find your way back to whatever you love. So I made my way back to fashion through studying. I didn't do a degree. I did a foundation at London College of Fashion. And pretty much all the other things that I've learnt along the way, I've either self-taught or taken part in courses, you know, away from a degree. So, and then Bestow Elan, I started selling, wearing clothes, and people always saying, where's that from, where's that from? So I decided, okay, I'm going to test the market, and I started doing a stall on Portobello. It went down really well. Went from there to selling to boutiques, and and the rest is history, really.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you'll be showing today?
Today is just like a second edition of my Glamour collection. It's mainly fabrics from Ghana, kente weaves and woven fabrics from Ghana. I tend to source, I'm trying to move towards fabrics that are not necessarily all wax prints. I'm trying to embrace other fabrics. So you'll find wool, like Scottish wool in there. So it's a collection of many fabrics and many shapes, my usual silhouettes, but yeah.
Thank you. So Samson. Hello. So Samson studied at Central St Martin's. He's worked as a stylist for magazines and many, many brands. He launched his own sort of soft furnishings, bags and scarves line in 1999, and then opened his store in Shoreditch in 2002 on Calvert Avenue, which at the time was nothing much going on there, and now it's this thriving street. And the last 2 years he's helped host the African Street Style Festival there, which has been a huge success. In 2012 he started his own line of wax print shirts, as we can see, and they went down well. He launched a full menswear line last year, which he's already showed in Berlin, Lagos and London. So Samson.
Hi.
Hi. Tell me a little bit more about your menswear line, why you launched it. You've gone from being retail and having accessories, why go the full 9 yards?
My journey started out because I couldn't really find anything that I wanted that was embracing my culture, but that was in kind of a fit and a kind of a silhouette that I wanted. So I just made a few shirts that I could just wear. Everywhere I went in them, everybody asked me about them, so I thought maybe I should just try them out in the shop. 150 shirts later, they're still selling strong, and it then developed into, well, I want a trouser to go with the shirt, I want a jacket to go with the whole look. So and then became a full menswear collection, which launched in Lagos Design Week. Arieta styled it. So it was really kind of an organic growth of my collection, if you like. A lot of women started wearing the shirts, and now you'll see later the full women's collection has been launched today. The first showing of it today.
And it's not for the faint-hearted, is it? How would you describe it?
Yeah, it's not for wallflowers, so shy people need not apply. It's more for people that kind of want to embrace colour. I feel alive when I wear it, and it feels like I'm making a statement when I wear it. But again, it's not, the silhouettes and the cuts are very sort of classic shapes. So I'm going to be moving away a little bit from, there'll always be some print in there, but it won't just be about the print.
Okay, great. Arieta on the end there. Silent so far, but not for long. So she began out life as a window dressing in Gap, then moved into styling for magazines such as Glamour and Red. All sorts of celebrities, Khalees, Lily Allen, Kelly Rowland. I first met her as a stylist at fashion shows. I don't think I've been to a fashion week where she's not been backstage, calling the shots, making lots of noise and demands. I used to be editor of a magazine called Arise. She did all of our fashion weeks in Lagos, our fashion shows in New York. The first fashion week we had was 77 designers in 3 days, of which Arieta dealt with, and I stayed far away from the chaos, but it went down very well. But she's also a PR guru, used to be at River Island as their PR manager and their fashion editor, was fully involved in the Rihanna collection, went on tour. I don't see how that's got to do with anything, but very lucky lady, yeah, brilliant. But then last year she took the plunge, left the high street and set up her own consultancy. So Ari, can you tell us all about the African Fashion Collective?
Having worked back and forth from the UK and going back to Africa to work on fashion weeks across, Botswana, Lagos, Ghana, and just realizing that, the African fashion that is on the continent has no bearing on what you see in the diaspora, I decided I was going to work with these very talented young designers or even old designers from Africa and see what we can do to try and push their creativity over here, because I felt there was this big disconnect with what is African fashion really. As Anne kind of touched on just now, that fashion you see in East Africa is very different from the fashion you see in West Africa. But we seem to have all generalized African fashion to be one print. Now I'm holding myself down because I have a serious issue with the fact that African fashion is all disregarded to come from a print. If it's not a print, it's not seen as African fashion. Well, I have news. That's not African fashion. That print is Dutch wax. It's commonly worn across Africa, but it's not African fashion. I don't know how you can generalize 55 countries' fashion aesthetic to a print. You don't say the French lace is European fashion. It's just French lace. So, I decided to try and work with young up-and-coming designers, and I've been so privileged to work with even established designers such as Samson over here to try and get give them the international coverage by getting them into the newspapers. So what I did as my job as head of PR for River Island and New Look was to promote the brand, get it coverage, which would encourage sales. So I started working with a few designers. Orange Culture, which is one of my designers, who was nominated for the LVMH prize, we shortlisted top 30. So here was this kid from Lagos, Nigeria, opposite, household British names like Christopher Shannon, Simone Rocha, Tillman, Stella Jean. We were just there, and it was them. That was a triumphant moment for what I thought was authentic. When you say authentic African fashion, he comes from Nigeria. His aesthetic is African. Though he doesn't use the fabric, his aesthetic comes from the continent. So I started trying to do that, and the collective came about. I've also got a shop element to the collective, because the biggest problem that most African designers face is stockists. They're not stocked anywhere. If you're not stocked anywhere, you can get all the coverage you want in the world, but if nobody's buying your clothes, you have no business. So I started a market space with ASOS. I was lucky enough because my old intern is now the editor of ASOS Marketplace, and she kind of helped me set up the shop. And what happens is I've got a few designers, Chichia included, even though she already has a stall and she's sold in Soboye, just to get that vibe going on about a few cool African brands. In my perception anyway, it's cool. I'm working with fresh, young, cool talent. If I've worked with them before, it's kind of to push that, we're not necessarily about the print, and if we're about the print, this is it in a cool way, a cool, wearable way. So that's kind of what African Creative Collective is all about in a nutshell.
Thank you, Ari. So generally, first wanted to get everyone's opinions on this current buzz, on this noise. Is it just a noise? Is it just a fad? How do we sustain it? And is there any particular, like you were saying, Orange Culture, Macchio being nominated for the LVMH award, anything sort of tangible happening now that's really exciting you all? Maybe start back at Anne.
I mean, I don't think it can be ignored. It's a continent on the move. And if the continent's on the move and there's so many people and those people keep on getting more and more and the economies are growing, the creativity is just bursting. It's just all over the place. So I don't think it's a question of, yeah, is it a fad? It can't be a fad. It will just continue.
Yeah, no, I think it's just the right time for African fashion. Individuals that wear it all embrace it. I think they feel vibrant. They feel they're standing out from the average person that wears, you know, contemporary clothes, because a lot of our fashions are bright. They have great silhouettes. You know, the fabrics we use are manipulated in particular ways. I think, you know, African fashion is creating a market for itself. So I mean, I'm hoping eventually it wouldn't matter about stockists or any of the mainstream stockists. Will create some kind of market that, you know, people know where to go to embrace us to purchase. I mean, Soboye's got his store, which is really an advantage. But a lot of us, yeah, the issue is stockists. But I think Africa as a whole, it's not going anywhere. So we just got to find ways to make it solid, really.
Any comments on this side?
Well, coming from the retail perspective, I think it's really interesting watching what does sell. The interesting thing that I found and was quite surprised about was that 90% of my clientele are white that have embraced it. They're not Africans. So it's about, they have been starved of a place to go and buy really creative things like Bestow, Elan, Chia, and I've got the best, I think I've got the best of what's out there in my shop. There's some brands that I still like, Jewel by Lisa, Macchio would be great in the store, but we've got local talent that's still not exposed. And my issue is with the London Fashion Week, the British Fashion Council. British Fashion Council, to me, says they want just white British people in their camp. I don't want to try and be controversial, but it just is what it is. Who are the designers that are, you know, Bestow and Elan could quite easily be on that platform, even in just selling in the stands there, as could Chia. Why aren't they being represented by the British Fashion Council? I've applied twice, 3 times to have things in there. They've just not given me an email back as to why we can't go in there or why we're not shown there. And it's not like we don't have the money to do it or the funds. It's just a complete blank, no, we're not having you.
See, Samson, I always question, do the Fashion Council or certain industries consider print as luxury? That's what I always question. Do you know what I mean?
Well, Burberry used it, and they're the highest end.
It's a trend thing, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Burberry do it, but they're not doing it constantly. They did it.
You see, this is on the flip side. This is the problem. If African fashion is just regarded as print, it will only be when print comes into fashion.
Yeah, this is it.
Then you get. It's same thing with coverage. Like trying to sell in a piece of coverage to a magazine, they would only use my clients, some of my clients, when it's a print story. So the bottom line is, African fashion is not all about the print.
Yeah.
It's inspiration that comes from Africa. It's kids of African origin taking what they've seen in the past. I mean, look at the gentlemen of Bamako, the surfers. You see that Guinness advert. You don't get more African than those dudes. And then you see the Rude Boy exhibition. And you're like, seriously, my grandpa's been dressing like that for like, since forever.
Yeah.
See the Guinness ad with those guys. It's nothing new to me. So as long as African fashion is still seen as print, we're not going nowhere.
I mean, it worked for me because that's I mean, I was just doing a printed shirt, then it became a full collection. So sometimes you've got to use what they know to get your foot in the door. So it's like, let's not cut our nice nose to spite our faces. If that's what they want, at some point you give them what they want, but then you have to move, as a designer, move your brand across, along to another place. Don't wait for them to tell you, print is over, therefore you're not any more, you're no more news, you're no more flavour. So it's about how you can tap into what's the trend and then move it on for yourselves.
I mean, just going on to what Samson just said, you see like their labels like Lisa Folawiyo, she changed it to Lisa Folawiyo. I remember when I first saw her, and there's a brand called Arieta in Lagos. This print, they embellish it so much you wouldn't even know it's the print. They've taken it to the next level. Now, that's luxury to me, but obviously we're yet to get through the doors. In countries like America or in Italy, because I'm going to Milan because a few of my African clients are actually given a platform to show there, it is readily accepted. It just seems like at the moment in the UK, print and African fashion is a fad.
Yeah, I get told all the time by, you know, I've got quite a wide client base, but often enough, you know, I wanted to collaborate with a jewellery designer, and she, in not so many words, said, well, I don't really think it'd be a benefit because, you know, my clients don't wear print. She assumed I was going to do print, add print to the jewellery, even though I was thinking of woven fabrics, etc., etc. So I think it's a mindset that has to sort of shift, really.
This is funny enough you said that, because yesterday I wore her jacket to London Fashion Week. It was a kente coat. You would never have known this was a kente, and kente is traditional African fabric. And everyone's like, oh, where's this coat from? And I say, you know, it's from an African designer, Bestow, Elan. They were all shocked because, again, their mind is, or the mentality is, African fashion is the print. So it's just I don't know, something's right. We shouldn't, you know, bite our nose to spite the eyes, but like, at what point do we say, like, it's not all about that? And I know you want to ask a question, but also traditional African fabrics are dying out because this is not being passed on. So like the art of making kente is dying out. Every year I see a tie-dye on Fashion Week, but they'll never use an African tie-dye designer, even though tie-dye comes like, it's originally from Africa, you know, the batik tie-dye. Well, you never see like Moroccan fashion designers because North Africa also is kind of ignored. But you go and look on the Fashion Week, you see that inspiration from Givenchy with the things from the nose into the ears, and my nomad brothers and sisters have been dressing like that for like centuries. So it's kind of, where do we, you know, where's the balance really in it all?
Can I ask, is there any interest in the fabrics being made on the continent? Because although you say print is Dutch wax, traditionally that's true, but there's many factories on the continent doing print. They're also weaving other kinds of fabrics, as you said, that kente cloth, but many other fabrics. And how important is it in this market for African fashion designers to be using fabrics from the continent, or is it irrelevant? Because for us, we're looking at building industry, we're looking at creating jobs. And although it's tough with competition from China, it's still of importance to us.
I think we just need to get to a point whereby it's just seen as fashion, not as African fashion. I mean, I was at Udin Choi's show, he's Chinese. I wouldn't say that was Chinese fashion, it's just a fashion designer just went to a fashion show. I think the more, you know, we push for our creativity to be seen and to be heard. For example, I had a client that she showed in New York, Josh and Nicole, and the first question somebody said when she came out at the end to take her bow, oh, we didn't think you'd be black or African, because her collection, Popidia, was inspired by the 18th century warrior queen, Queen Idia of Benin, and the pop art movement of the 1960s. So there was no print involved. You just had Queen Idia's face, which is like a bronze cast head that's in the British Museum, on everything. And when she came out, that was the first reaction people said to her. Oh, I didn't think you were going to be black, talk less of you being African. Then on the flip side, you see brands like Louis Vuitton going to use the Maasai cloth to make a whole collection, you know. So I think we just need to, I don't know how or when, but it needs to get to a point whereby it's not African fashion, it's just fashion done by Africans. You see what I mean?
I'm a bit kind of ambiguous about this, because on the one hand, Africa is a place that has a very strong identity. To not use it for its strengths is like, well, that is a bit ridiculous. Like China and India, there's things about these places that are very specific to that locale. So to say not use African fashion and call it African is like, well, we're not using, yeah, there might be a stereotypical thing of what, or notion of what is African, but to not use it seems a bit...
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with your sense, because having that African fashion umbrella does sometimes assist you into taking part in events like Arise or, you know, different fashion weeks.
Yeah.
So I think it does have its benefits. You know, I've got friends that are of Caribbean descent and are always saying to me, oh, how comes everything's about African fashion?
Yeah.
Because they don't have a platform to do pretty much what they want to do. So in a way, it does have its benefits, really.
And also, if I can go back about the distribution, we're talking about, like, I'd love to work with African designers that are making cloths and work with, I'm dying to just go to the dyeing vats where they do all the indigo and all the stuff that's traditionally Nigerian, the ashe-oke. I want to really find a way of using it and bringing it back and making it luxury. Some of those fabrics are really, really beautiful. But there's a way of trying to get it over here, because they make it for the local market. They don't see it beyond their locality. And so I'm trying to get to a point where, no, there is a whole world out there, and let's use it, modernise it, contemporize it. But they're not really that bothered.
I mean, brands like Dior Sego and Makio do use ashoke. Like I have a jacket that looks like a fur coat, but it was ashoke that was actually shredded and by Makio. I think it's also education. If I'm totally honest, it all boils down to education, and because we don't have fashion colleges. There's no one teaching people that this is what you do, these are the steps you take. Actually, everybody just kind of knows. I know the auntie taught them, or to go watch mom do it or something. So they don't understand about there being processes. And speaking of you want to go and work with these people, the first thing you'll be met with was resistance. It's not a 1 year or 2 year or 3 year thing. It has to be constant. I'm sure you found that when you first went over to Kenya. It was not a 1 year thing, with these people. You almost have to sit there with them and kind of get engaged in their culture and what they're doing, because again, I said there's a serious disconnect between us over here and what's actually happening on the continent, because brands like Makio would be in the market with these people who are making that ashoke for 2 months and emerge from this bush with this beautiful product. But I think it's about it's educating them, because they don't know, and then when you come up to them, you're met with the resistance, kind of like they don't want you to steal their techniques from them. Almost.
When we get to a point where made in Nigeria or made in Kenya is stuck in the label, and people think, oh, that's nice, it looks great, it's on a world stage, but it says made in Nigeria, made in Ghana, made in wherever it is in Africa it's made, and we're proud to wear it from wherever we come from. That would be a really major move forward for us as designers, as a world, looking at Africa as a place where things originate from and are produced and manufactured. Then that would be a really big breakthrough.
But ironically, African people don't wear African. Full stop. Yeah. There's been movements across Africa by Nigerian, by Ghanaian. It just started in the last 3-4 years. African people do not wear African clothes, but clothes by African designers. Full stop. They don't. So I think the continent that has over XYZ billion people, if we alone stood and was like, yes, we're going to support our own designers and our own markets, that would make a big impact. Instead of you coming to spend your money in Selfridges, I was reading a report about 2 years ago about Nigerians spend over 2.6 million in Selfridges every year. Can you imagine that money going back into the economy? I've met girls from Nigeria who have all the bags in the world, all the Hermes bags and all the, designer shoes in the world, and they'll be wearing I've met a lady that wears next season Prada in Lagos. And I'm just like, how
but
do you get
that's because of a lot of Africans want to stand out, and they want to feel like they're better than others, and they're progressing. They're not necessarily. They have to see our fabrics and our clothes as luxury, and I just don't think that's what I'm trying
to say. Until we educate them on the process, until there's some sort of process that again goes back to being educated and knowing that. And the biggest thing that happens in Africa, if an African like Samson could be wearing this lovely shirt, well finished and everything, and you told an African person the price, I can make it for cheaper.
Exactly.
My auntie can make my auntie will make this for cheaper. What do you mean? Again, it's educating them that, yes, I'm sure it can, but have you seen, I'm a designer. That person who can make that for you is a tailor. There's a big difference.
They don't use
my shirt is paneled.
My
shirt is fitted, There is subtle difference. The big difference is that they don't take, it's not considered back home.
Okay, can I say that, that's generally true, but there are some rays of hope. The majority of my clients are black, they're African. I've got a lot of Kenyans, and I also have African expats, even Nigerians buying from my shop in Nairobi. So there is hope. I think a lot of it's also to do with fake pricing, because people are used to second-hand clothing and dumping. And that creates this false thing that even a designer cannot make clothes within that. So there is a need for maybe fast fashion made by African brands to get that finance to be able to do it and distribute in mass. That would help, because we don't really have our reference points. They may be talking about Zara, Marks and Spencer's. This is in Kenya. That's who they're looking to. It's not the same as Nigeria with Louis Vuitton and so on.
So I think there's a ray of hope. I think the money needs to be there. I think we need to be, because we have to produce in volume to be able to get the pricing right. But there's a huge aspirational market that would afford a Zara price point. So it's about how do we tap into that?
I mean, I did a study for the UK Trade and Investment on market entry into the retail sector in Nigeria, and you'd be surprised what brands are vying to get into Nigeria. At the moment, they've got MAC, Maybelline, Levi's, Zara, Mango. They've got brands from South Africa, Edgar's, Woolworths, and a few other brands. And these are all the fast fashion is now creeped into Nigeria. Gone are the days when you should buy second-hand clothes and get your mom to make you stuff. And what you find is that it's just the mentality shift within the government now that see that they don't want money to be spent outside the country. They want to kind of bring money into the country. And I think with that, it, like Anne said, if we could, again, it's a thing, and there seems to be some sort of generation disconnect also as well. The thing, if the governments and the people in power could understand and support the local, design, local designers or local talents, because don't forget, most of all these production companies, anywhere in West Africa, production and manufacturing companies were shut down in the 80s and the 90s, so they're not able to handle that volume. But thankfully in places like Ghana and Kenya now, you guys are actually building the factories again, and then people are actually producing. But what you also find on the flip side of that is that international brands are all in there, and most of these factories are booked up for like 10 years at a time. So you as a local African designer can't even get your stuff mass produced in there because there's no space for you, or you're now priced out of that market. So what they do, they go to China or go to India.
Okay, we have a few opportunities there. I mean, there are definitely factories that take I work with factories a lot. Another interesting thing in Kenya is Debenhams is moving in, and 30% of the floor space is going to be for local designers. And you do find a lot of Kenyan musicians wearing Kenyan designed products. So yeah, it's often about how you get it to the consumer, because this Debenhams thing is giving us an opportunity, I think. But I think also getting into a market like London, for me, as I said, is critical, because I want to put London, Nairobi, or New York, London, Nairobi. I don't want just my brand to be Nairobi, because I feel I will be eaten by these other brands that are coming in otherwise. Yeah.
I suppose getting to the point where just Nairobi would be a good thing. So, obviously the International Hair Tribune conference a couple of years ago was entitled The Promise of Africa. And the whole message of the two-day event was how Africa owns luxury, how that becomes its byword, how, something that's completely unique, handcrafted in Africa with these amazing textiles you can't get anywhere else, becomes what people want. And they're not going to go to Selfridges and spend their money there instead. I mean, do you think that's the way forward, or is it, well, I suppose it's both, but also the challenges blocking the fast fashion are quite large, because you can't go up against Zara, you can't produce those amounts of fabric, so is it better to be smaller but more, higher price point?
I think there's a backlash against China. I think everyone's overexposed to the fast market, and for my shop, certainly, the handcraft is winning over. Anything that I've had mass produced is never sold. Anything that's on a cheaper price point, people that don't come into Soboye for bargains, it's not the place to come. It's for something that's special, handcrafted, beautifully made, has longevity beyond a season. And if we can educate people to value the things that they're buying, not have throwaway things, I would imagine the Bestow Elan coat is going to be a classic. The black and white coat has been one of my best sellers this season. So having those pieces that are special, handmade, there's real beauty in what's being offered, is going to be the way forward. And also, pricing is very key. People are very price sensitive. So there's a point where if you do it too cheap, it loses its value. If it's too high, then it's like a joke. So I'm very sensitive to what we can sell things for. People do understand that. So it is, again, partly education, teaching people what is of value, and making it a competitive price. It's not going to be too cheap. I had people here that have said, I'm selling, this fabric was bought in Nigeria, I'm selling the shirts for $150 in my shop, and they're £100 here, and people are still saying they're expensive here. But that is mainly the people off the street that are still uneducated into what things are costing. So there is, an awareness problem that people don't understand. It's made in London, it's a shirt maker, it's from Jermyn Street, and the quality and the finish is key. It's all about that. So if we can make people understand that quality does cost money, and throwaway fashion is just that. So we don't really want the people that are coming from Zara straight to us. It's a different clientele.
I think it's different in Africa. I'm talking about the African market.
I mean, you've got shop fronts. How do you find your...
I like to go up market, but I can't afford to be totally up market. So my price entry point would probably be about £60 for a dress. But my upper end might be, I'm just doing quick arithmetic, probably £300, £400. So I've got different labels within that. Yeah.
Because you have the beginnings of sort of boutique shopping in Africa. You've got a Lara opening in Lagos at the end of the year, which is a really lovely idea in terms of bringing the more high-end African brands like Duralulu in with Marnies and Dries and art objects and design objects and elevating it all into one really nice story about art and design. You've got Merchants on Long in Cape Town. You have these beginnings of really nice boutique stores, but again, they're not going to be frequented by that many people. It's going to be only the few who can afford to go in them. And I don't know if anyone has any other thoughts on retail and how that can be helped, or how designers can get to market if they don't have their own stores.
Well, because there is an online presence now, if you have a boutique or shop, you want a shopping experience. You don't want to go in there and just be like any other shop. So it has to be an experience of going into that shop. So Selfridges kind of offer it. Bluebird on Kings Road offer it. So when you go into the shop, there has to be a shopping experience. It's not the same as shopping in IKEA or Primark. It has to be, I mean, I don't know if you've been in Primark, you have to queue forever, and it's like, no, get me out of here. I don't care how cheap it is, I'm getting out of here. I'd rather spend £10 more for a pair of shoes and have a nice experience rather than a horrible experience. So if you offer that, then that's got to be the point of difference.
I mean, I also think, price point is really important. I've tried I've tried all the different levels. I've tried to make it cheap enough. I can't make it cheap enough in this country. That's my final conclusion. But I've tried to do like a diffusion range, which I always thought would be my supplementary part of my business. I realised it didn't work. So I think I've decided to keep it at what I consider, it's always going to be niche. As much as I've been trying to make it as mainstream as possible, I've almost accepted my brand's going to be niche, therefore particular boutiques are going to buy into it. People that really are that follow the brand, they do buy online. They purchase directly from my online store. I just think for us as small brands, it's just, you just can't rely on waiting for the retailer to accept you. You just have to keep trying to find your own unique avenues.
Absolutely.
So is e-commerce the way forward? I mean, you've got Sapel, you've got Design by Africa, you've had Hedge 1980, you've got Kiswa. I mean, have you all fully explored those avenues? I mean, did it work? Is it working on ASOS?
Yeah, it's working so far, so good. I mean, the shop only launched in June, and the collection that was on there, we've kind of sold out of most of everything. Having said that, it's about keeping it up because, again, if you're going to have a shop on ASOS, then it's about fast fashion. So that's the other side. So you're kind of like, again, I've shot myself in the foot now because I'm onto the designer saying, what's next, what's next, what's next? And because the stuff is coming from Africa, or the fabric is coming from Africa, they can't make it fast enough. And then the season finishes, it's kind of like, what's next for the next season? So I have like a 4 to 6 week kind of like, that was at the time from when I can hold stock on the website. So it's kind of like, what's next? And then on the flip side, you have websites in Nigeria now that offer fast fashion, or across Africa, like Jumia.com and Konga.com, whereby, you can buy everything. So they basically give you like an Amazon experience now. You can buy any and anything on those websites, clothes included. And they deliver them to your house. Because what you find is that Africa is a very young continent. By that I mean the young people outnumber the old. And by that I mean lots of people, for example, in West Africa, only about 30% of the population in West Africa are over 65. That means everybody else there is younger, and they're expecting a different level of service, and what they want is different from what your parents are used to. So what also happens is that traditional forms of retailing, like going to the market to buy stuff, to buy clothes, is kind of like dying out. So it's about demand and supply.
But they want cheap fashion.
They want cheap fast fashion.
I've been down that route and realised, they love your pieces, but it's the price points again.
Yeah, it's just when they then take your clothes to go and give to the tailor.
To the tailor.
And the tailor says, so, see this dress? Make me this dress, please. That's what happens.
That's an avenue we kind of want to explore, because we've had a very limited production run on our pieces, but we've got the fabric, so we've been doing made-to-measure service, and that's kind of worked out. It's a bit of a headache, but we can see it as a way forward, as on a long-term thing, doing we've made in traditional what we call model sizes, from a 10 to a 14, but obviously a vast proportion of people are much bigger or petite. So we're trying to build in a tailor-made service so you can get the same look for a little bit more money and in the choice of your fabrics, and that could be a way forward. Making some more.
Then that's the difference between you being the designer and then you being a tailor, because in Africa, a lot of people, tailors masquerading as designers at the moment. So then that could be a serious issue, because what you're doing is you're probably going to water down the quality of the product which you and the service you as your brand offer if you get the tailor-made services.
They'll only be able to buy what we stock in terms of design. So if they wanted this shirt, they can have it in a different fabric. They can't bring a pattern to me to copy. That's absolutely no way.
And then what you find is that tailor who is offering that service would then start making those clothes for the people, kind of without you.
Yeah. But one thing I've realised has kept my brand going is my cut, because I cut for African body types. And I think that's a thing that's often left out. I see so many African bodies wearing very bad fitting clothes because they're not cut for them. So in Kenya, that's certainly been a major plus. Yeah.
At the end of the day, the designers are African, and often enough, people don't necessarily see the value in our products, and that's my personal opinion. Yeah. I just don't think. I've had people come to my studio and say, oh, this is really nice, how much is it? And I've given them a cheaper price because I'm thinking, oh, well, no postage, and they're saying, yeah, I'll come back. And you know what that means. And that's, that's given them what I consider mates rates, and they're still not buying. So I don't think it's just down to the fabric. I just think it's just the spending power.
Great. Thank you to my lovely panellists. I really appreciate it. I know you've got a fashion show to do right now. Thank you, everyone, for coming.